Good afternoon everyone and welcome to our webcast on investing in finance in climate emergency. My name is Heather Marsh from the Chartered Banker Institute and today I'm delighted to introduce Zero Waste Scotland's Chief Finance Officer Lynn Murray. Lynn will discuss the opportunities for businesses presented by the circular economy and what that means for investors and financiers, from new business models to closer relationship with customers. I hope you enjoy today's webcast and I'll now hand you over to Lynn.
Thank you, Heather. Hello everyone, I'm very happy to be speaking with you today. In the time that we've got, I'm going to introduce you to Zero Waste Scotland and what our achievements are so far and our goals, how Scotland is tackling climate emergency through the circular economy, the importance that the banking sector has in our ambitions and what you can do. Then Peter McCafferty, who's our Circular Economy Manager at Zero Waste Scotland, is going to talk about what circular business models exist, why they are the businesses of the future and what that means to investors. We're also delighted to introduce Brian O'Reilly, who's the Managing Director of Egg Lighting, who will tell us about his business, which is based on a circular economy business model. And we'll take questions at the end if that's okay, although I think Heather is going to field the questions for us. Well, she's going to introduce them and we'll answer. Although please feel free to ask them as you think of them when we go through the presentation. So just a bit about Zero Waste Scotland. Zero Waste Scotland is a not-for-profit private company limited by guarantee, which was established in 2014. And we're leading Scotland to use products and resources responsibly to tackle climate emergency. We're the experts in circular economy business development in Scotland, and we receive funding from the Scottish Government and also the European Regional Development Fund. We advise Scottish Government on policy related to resources. We advise consumers on how to make the most responsible choices, and we help Scottish businesses on adapting to and also generating income from circular business practices. Additionally, we offer practical business support, and that could include just providing inspiration to organisations, education, networking opportunities and also funding. So we focus on business benefits and increased sustainability through better use of resources. As part of a collective approach with the Scottish Government and other agencies, we helped Scotland to be named as one of the leading nations driving a circular economy in the annual Circular Awards at the World Economic Forum in January 2017. Something that we are very proud of. We're still talking about it in 2020. Don't worry if you don't know what the circular economy is. By the end of this presentation, you'll be all over it. If you haven't heard of Zero Waste Scotland, you may recognise some of our brands. I've put some of them up on the slides, and we'll tell you about that a bit more shortly. In terms of achievements, yeah, I'm certain you will be aware of many of our achievements, even if you don't realise that it was Zero Waste Scotland that was leading the change. So through our strategic approach to reducing food waste, we've reduced this. We've reduced food waste, which is the most dangerous household waste stream because of its carbon emissions, and we've reduced food waste by 7% between 2011 and 2015, which is significant. We've also rolled out food waste collections to the majority of Scottish households, so if you live in Scotland, I know we have a lot of international colleagues that are watching this as well. But in Scotland, the majority of households do have a food waste bin, and it was us that did that. And it's now mandatory for business in any part of the food supply chain to present food waste for collection. We advised and supported the Scottish Government on charging 5p for a single-use bag, which they recently announced they would increase to 10 pence. And the 5% charge reduced single-use bags by 80% in its first year, so it was quite incredible really. We're also making second-hand first choice by rolling out a quality standard for use called Revolve, and a lot of second-hand shops work towards getting their Revolve accreditation. We've also saved Scottish businesses more than £200 million through our Resource Efficient Scotland programme, And through this programme, we help businesses reduce their energy, water and material usage through efficiencies. These businesses typically save 24% on their energy bills, pretty significant, and we've reduced Scotland's emissions by 1 million tonnes as a result. So, pretty impressive. In terms of what we've achieved so far, we're delivering a circular economy in Scotland through investment funding and support, which we'll discuss a bit more in depth today. We're standardising recycling systems across the country, and I'm sure you've heard about the work we're doing in rolling out a deposit return scheme, where you pay 20p deposit when you buy a drinks can or bottle, that's regardless of the material, and you'll get that 20p back when you present it for recycling. So we're aiming to capture over 90% drinks containers in this scheme, which will make a real impact on reducing what goes to landfill. As you'll be aware, a climate emergency has been declared by the Scottish Government, the UK Government in Westminster and also the Welsh Government, and it is a global issue. We've got net zero targets, and you'll hear people talking about it, and that's fantastic. In fact, Scotland's carbon emissions are reducing each year, and they have done since 2008. But net zero only takes account of the emissions released here in Scotland. Scotland is a predominantly service-based economy. Manufacturing has decreased significantly, and we import most of what we consume. So around 4/5 of Scotland's carbon footprint is caused by our huge collective consumption habit. We like to shop. That's 80%. Just think about that for a moment. So what we've done is we've offshored our carbon, and the manufacturing economies of the world, like China and India, have seen their emissions skyrocket. Or should I say our emissions. So the goods and materials that we increasingly import to feed our constant craving for new things are often cheap to buy, but they cost the planet dearly. Zero Waste Scotland recently launched our corporate plan from 2019 to 2023, in which we seek to reduce Scotland's carbon footprint. And this includes our emissions globally. We're not just thinking of Scotland. It's a new vision for Scotland, and I'd like to share it with you now. What I would say is that it's a video that I'm going to share. Now, when we've done tests of the video, the sound might not be as clear as we would like it, but it will be online, so you can watch it at your leisure afterwards. So here is the video.
Scotland and much of the world has declared a emergency. Global emissions are destroying us, and if we carry on as we are, it's set to get worse. 4/5 of Scotland's carbon footprint comes from products and materials. The production, consumption and waste of these products and materials are heating the earth at an alarming rate. This includes the energy required to grow, bake, process and transform, whether they are made here in Scotland or elsewhere. Climate change doesn't respect borders. It affects everyone. Roughly 3 planets would be required if everyone lived the way people live in Scotland. We only have one. But Scotland can show the world. For Zero Waste Scotland, that means leading Scotland to use products and resources responsibly, making Scotland a pioneer of the circular economy, just as we were a pioneer of the industrial revolution. Our organisation is already at the heart of a political and public shift in attitude towards the environmental consequences of our lifestyles, making us a lighthouse of a circular economy. Our strategic outcomes will focus on where, as a society, we can have the greatest impact on climate change. They include responsible consumption, helping people live sustainable lives so we don't exhaust the Earth's natural resources. Responsible production, changing the way industry designs and trades goods so materials are kept in circulation for as long as possible. And maximising value from waste and energy. So where waste occurs, we make sure we reuse or recycle as much as we can. But we need to do more, much more. Of course, it won't be easy. But with our dedicated people, great relationships with partners, and trust from businesses and organisations, we are well placed to achieve it. And we need others to help, both locally and internationally. To meet the scale of the challenge, we need to evolve as an organisation. That's why we're transforming Zero Waste Scotland to meet our ambitions, investing in our staff, building valuable partnerships will define our future success. Through our values of being pioneering, collaborative, focused, and authentic, we will show the world how to live a truly low-carbon life. This is our vision. This is our future. This is our plan. Are you ready to help make it happen?
Hi, sorry about that, slight technical glitch. So I'm sure you found the video as impactful as I did. Our corporate plan has got 3 external outcomes. The first one is responsible consumption. As I said earlier, the vast majority of Scotland's carbon footprint, that 4/5 figure, is caused by the production and consumption of goods and resources. So reducing demand from consumers and businesses alike for our limited reserves of raw materials used to manufacture the countless everyday items which we buy, and often also waste, will bring by far the greatest results in cutting the carbon emissions driving the climate emergency. Our second outcome is responsible production. And this priority goes in tandem with responsible consumption, changing the way the products we buy are designed and sold so they all last longer and we won't need to buy so much. So we'll work with those firms which have already started along this path and persuade and support others to join us, making circular business the rule, not the exception as it is now. This work will include showcasing Scotland's circular economy pioneers in wider arenas than we have done so far, to reach firms across all sectors and convince them that becoming sustainable is both necessary and profitable. And our third outcome is maximising value from waste and energy. Unfortunately, but inevitably, there will still be some waste, but we will collaborate with innovators and investors to test new ways to maximise the value of materials and energy. Sorry, the slides aren't moving forward. They seem to have disappeared from the screen. Here we are. Okay. So we believe that the Scottish economy can prosper. If we keep on consuming products and materials at the incredible rate which we currently do in Scotland, we will need 3 planets to sustain us. That start warning was issued by the Scottish Environment Protection Agency in 2016. And since then, global emissions have continued to rise 4 years later because we have yet to heed that warning. While some foresee the prospect of colonising Mars becoming science fact rather than science fiction, we still have just the one planet which we need to protect as a matter of urgency. Now that really is science fact, not science fiction. And with the human population set to reach a staggering 9.5 billion by 2050, including a growing global middle class that's got the money and the desire to buy more things, demand for the Earth's natural resources will only continue to increase if we carry on ignoring the problem and sticking stubbornly to business as usual. It's just not an option. So what is the circular economy? We've talked about it quite a lot, but what is it? Now, this simple visual explains it well. So if you look to the left of the visual, we want to move from the big bin with lots of stuff in it to the small bin with less stuff. Circular economy is based on finding new ways to reduce our demand on natural resources and to keep materials and products flowing through the economy at as high a value as possible for as long as possible. It's about moving away from an outdated model of make, use and dispose, and we call this the linear model, where we take resources from the ground, air and water, make them into products and structures, then dispose of them, to a model of A circular model, which is leasing, sharing, reusing and remanufacturing. The popular ways of describing the circular economy include ending our throwaway society and making things last. It's about long-term ownership of quality products. This is about innovation in the way we manufacture and consume products and services, and that starts with design. So considering the whole life cycle of a product and service as part of the design, that is ensuring long life, reuse, repairability, manufacture, and ultimately recycling. So let's make this relevant to you as bankers. The current model of our economy isn't circular. As I said, it's linear, which means we dig things up, make things out of them, refrigerate, package, transport, retail, etc., and throw them away when we're finished with them. The model is fraught with risks, as you can see in the slide. I'm sure these are the types of businesses that you invest in now. Ask yourself, are these the businesses that you're going to invest in the future, or indeed want to invest in the future? I'll leave that with you to think about. So in a circular economy, we can eliminate or mitigate these risks, as we have mechanisms for keeping products and resources in use for as long as possible. If we recycle, we capture the materials, so we eliminate the emissions from the resource section, and critically for you, the risk associated with resource capacity. But recycling only captures the materials, remember. A product has a lot of value added to it that a raw material doesn't. So if we can keep the product in high use, we can prevent the need to add that value into raw materials. These models eliminate emissions elsewhere in the chain and give the business a close relationship with the customer, as we'll hear from my colleagues shortly. The momentum behind changing to a more circular economy is becoming unstoppable. Across the globe, big business, tech innovators, governments and local communities are embracing the potential of a circular economy to deliver growth, which supports the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. In a Scottish context, our work contributes to national outcomes on economic development, employment, place-making and access to services, protecting our natural environment and reducing impact of consumption and production. That includes helping achieve the following targets or indicators set by Scottish Government. Some of these indicators, it's a bit of a list, but recycling 70% of all waste by 2025, and sending no more than 5% to landfill, reducing waste by 7% by 2017, and 15% by 2025 from 2013 levels. Reducing food waste that we talked about earlier by 33% by 2025, meeting 50% of total energy demand from renewables by 2032, and reducing Scotland's greenhouse gas emissions by 60% by 2032. We do like a challenge in Scotland. So if I can summarise, a circular future makes business sense. In terms of influencing and informing policy direction, Zero Waste Scotland will focus on where we can have the greatest impact. Now, this can't be done alone, and we will collaborate with partners to achieve success, and that includes the banking and investment sector, and why we're very keen to do webinars at an event such as this. So we have to challenge long-established social norms, and when I say we, I mean all of us, and drive behaviour change. It's everyone's personal responsibility to make changes to what and how we consume, and I challenge you all to think about the changes you could make in your personal and business life. So this is what should be discussed at the forthcoming COP26 conference being held in Scotland. And because we will only end our contribution to climate change if we address our consumption and the emissions associated. Zero Waste Scotland is challenging ourselves as well. We're not just challenging everybody else. And our fourth outcome is to transform our organisation to deliver this new business model in our corporate plan. So to bring it back to banking, Mark Carney said fairly recently that companies and industries that are not moving towards zero carbon emissions will be punished by investors and go bankrupt. Certainly something to leave my presentation on. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Peter. Peter supports businesses and he'll talk you through some of the business models these companies are adopting that you can look out for.
Okay, thanks Lynn. Yep, so I'm Peter McCafferty and I deliver on Zero Waste Scotland's Circular Economy Business Support Service that's been running since December 2016. And in that time we've worked with just over 180 SMEs across the whole of Scotland and across multiple sectors as well. So what I'd like to do is quickly talk through some of the main circular economy strategies that we've seen explored and developed and in some cases implemented over that period. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail on each one. What we've done is categorise these strategies into kind of 9. So I'll give an overview of those in the hope that some or all of them might pique your interest and hopefully you can start to see how these models and strategies can fundamentally alter how companies interact with the market, with their customers and with each other as well. Before I move into the individual models, I think it's worth noting and bearing in mind that not all of these are necessarily standalone models. Quite often they can be combined or layered to create an overall strategy, so some of them are very complementary and I'll kind of group them as I go as well. And also I think it's valuable as a business, and certainly my experience of delivering the business support service kind of bears this out. It's useful to think not just about your own offering as a business, in which case you might quickly discount something like remanufacturing, for example, because you're not currently a manufacturing company, but to think how you as a customer or as another business might be able to support circularity in others, for example, through your own supply chain via products and services, and for products and services that you yourself are a customer. So let's move on to the list then. The first one is circular design, and as Lynn noted, circular design really underpins, I think, everything from products to services in a circular economy, and this is obviously about going back to first principles and then looking ahead. So what we really mean by circular design is how we future-proof our design, and that can be for products and services. For products, it can be about building in things like modularity to allow for upgrade and easier repair or reuse. From a business model point of view, it's about thinking how you can effectively build in the supporting mechanisms that will allow for that type of activity kind of, effectively and efficiently. So that's thinking again about how you interact with your customer. Do you need to change that relationship so that you can access products maybe 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 years down the line to effect those repairs or those upgrades and keep products in circulation for much longer. Resource recovery, sometimes talked about as added value reprocessing. So this is quite simply taking a material which could be classed as a waste or a core or a byproduct, converting that into something which is a much higher value, and in some cases actually it's not just about adding value, but it's about avoiding a cost in terms of waste or resource management. And also probably a good point just to throw in that in a pure circular economy, I think we would have eliminated the concept of waste entirely, and we would be thinking about resources and material streams, because everything that circulates in a circular economy should either have a value in terms of its reusability, or if it's not something that is adding to the system, it should really be designed out through circular design. So yes, so resource recovery is about taking something which could be classed as waste or a co-product and converting it into something which has much higher value, and that can either be internally to your own organisation, or working in partnerships with other industries and sectors, and that's something that we see quite commonly across sectors like bioeconomy, where it's quite high tech and bleeding edge processes and applications that we're seeing coming through. Number 3 on the list is enabling technology, and that's essentially anything that supports or enables a circular model for others. So I think what we're really talking about here is things like software platforms or databases that can track materials or allow access to assets and space and equipment in support of things like remanufacturing and sharing economy models, which we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. I think the final point on enabling technology is that quite often they can be practical, but also they have a role to play in terms of behaviour change and mainstreaming a lot of the activity that we talk about when we talk about circular economy models. So 4 and 5 on the list I'm going to combine, so product as a service and leasing. I think quite often they are distinct, but they're quite often closely connected. So fundamentally, leasing is asking the question about whether we need to own our assets or whether we're more interested in their function. And then that can be aligned to a product or a service model that allows for layers of value to be added. So, and again, that can fundamentally change the relationship you have with a customer. So rather than sell an item or an asset, what you are selling is the outcome. And then that allows you to kind of build on that and offer additionality in terms of maintenance, ongoing upkeep, etc. So yeah, so that's 4 and 5 combined. Jumping ahead to number 6, which is remanufacture. So this is something that definitionally can be a bit confusing in some contexts, but essentially remanufacture is the stripping back of a product or a component back down to its own individual component level. So it's actually quite a complex disassembly, cleaning process, assessing and making repairs or replacements to individual components and then reassembling that module back up into a condition which is either new or in some cases better than new and can be supported by a warranty and certification and sold back onto the market. So potentially quite a complex process, but it's one that can add a lot of value if you are constantly remanufacturing and assessing your own products and components. It allows you to identify common failure modes and actually make corrections to those. So one of the benefits to remanufactured products, and it's a model that we see, by the way, quite often in aerospace and automotive industries. One of the benefits of that process is that the remanufactured unit that goes back to the market quite often is of a higher quality in terms of durability and lifespan to the original model. It's something that Rolls-Royce do with their airplane engines, for example. And then onto the next slide, again, two that go really well together. We've got reuse and repair, and these two elements I think are cornerstones of circular economy, and they're very complementary. And at at a fundamental level, these are about maintaining and extending the usable life of an item or items for as long as possible. And I think that the trick to effective reuse and repair is quite often having an understanding of the product and the material streams that you're working with, but also having the supporting systems in place that allow access to those, and then also bringing in the skill sets to actually conduct that repair activity and put something back onto the market. Quite widespread benefits we see from these type of models in terms of upscaling education and employability opportunities as well. So in terms of growing the economy, and remanufacture, I think, is similar in the way that we can upskill the workforce to actually carry out those activities. And then finally, sharing economy. I think this it's an interesting one. It's something which is almost stands slightly apart, but is definitely a key element of a holistic circular economy. So quite simply, these are models like, for example, Airbnb or Zipcar, which allow you to tackle the issue of idle assets and maximise the value of those assets by facilitating access to space and equipment when they're otherwise sitting idle. So Airbnb initially obviously was empty properties, which were then through the enabling app matched up with people who wanted short-term rents for holidays. And Zipcar is very similar. It allows you via a technology solution to access and unlock vehicles that would otherwise just be sitting idle by the side of the road or in somebody's driveway. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the 9. I would, if you want to investigate any of those in more detail, I'd encourage you to go to our Circular Economy Accelerator website, which includes kind of more detailed insight into each of those strategies, as well as support and case studies of businesses who we've seen actually take these forward. And obviously, if you want to discuss the support that is available to explore those, we would be very happy to have that conversation, so just get in touch. However, on that note, I'll pass over to Brian as one of the companies who have actually pressed ahead with a circular economy model to share his experience.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you to everybody that's on the webinar for giving up a bit of your lunch, if not all of your lunch today. In many ways, the lighting industry exemplifies the challenges that are present in the transition from a linear to a circular economy. More specifically, lighting deals with built-in obsolescence and advances in energy efficiency. Tungsten bulbs were disrupted by fluorescent by LED in very quick succession. With tungsten and fluorescent, we've seen very little innovation in extending lifespans, and bulbs were cheap. Some of you will remember energy companies giving away fluorescent light bulbs in 2010, and just after everybody got the free light bulbs, it was time to change to LED. We went from free to very expensive in a few years, and in the process we generated a huge amount of waste. Perfectly functional bulbs were relegated to waste because of new, more energy efficient ones. At the time, I personally was not critical, as improved energy efficiency was the right goal, and in addition my electricity bills were reduced. I didn't consider the environmental impact, as I thought it was a one-off, even though it happened twice. However, it's now clear that the lighting industry will continue to change and continue to innovate, and sustainability needs to be at the heart of this. That's the next one. So I've skipped a slide. Advances in technology help drive our economy. We all want the latest phone, computer and car. We want better and more efficient stuff. However, we need to be careful that the advances in tech do not unnecessarily drive material and excessive resource consumption. For example, a new iPhone is released every year. Apple deliberately hijacked the performance of older phones to, quote, maintain battery life. And ironically, it's just a coincidence that this also prompts users to assume that the phone is now rubbish and that they have to buy a new one. In lighting 3 years ago, the LED market had 40 watt, 600 by 600 panels. A 600 by 600 panel is very common in an office. It might be above your head right now. It's just a little square light. 40 watts 3 years ago. Today they are 18 watts and giving out the same amount of light. This improvement is within LED. We're going from LED to LED, and it has an ROI of less than 18 months. So if you had bought LED 3 years ago, it would be 40 watts. Today it would be 18 watts. for the same amount of light. If LED efficiency increases at a similar rate, then financial directors can easily justify replacing lighting every 2 years, and in doing so generate an unprecedented amount of waste. Currently, LED design is focused on energy efficiency and not material efficiency. Technology can be used to enhance existing products and keep them useful, relevant and increase lifespans. Think Tesla cars that get updates that extend the battery range. However, some thought needs to go into how increased product lifespans affects consumer behaviour and the relevance of current investment vehicles. Manufacturers are challenged to remain profitable with longer sales cycles, and consumers are asking themselves what do they need to physically own versus having access to a service. Think CDs to Spotify or DVDs to Netflix. The advance in technology within an LED fitting represents about 4% of the overall material in the fitting. This 4% is baked in a way that makes recycling and remanufacturing very difficult. Therefore, when the 4% becomes obsolete, so too does the other 96%. We can choose either the entire product can expire when the technology advances, or we can design it in a way that allows the tech to be upgraded as and when appropriate. Egglinton designs the products by first looking at the lifespan of each component and putting it together in such a way that each component can be replaced at the right time with minimal effort. We have simplified serviceability and have developed criteria to decide when the tech should be upgraded. For example, when do energy efficiency improvements justify an upgrade? By designing a product to be kept in service indefinitely, we keep value in the product and can really slow down and possibly reverse the depreciation of the asset. In order to do this, we need constant access to the product. Ideally, we need to own it in perpetuity. Material efficiency is better achieved when the supplier or manufacturer owns or is responsible for the product indefinitely. Somebody has to be responsible for it, and we have the skills to manage, maintain, service, upgrade and re-warrant. We are well placed to generally invest in the product and improve it over time. From an investment point of view, the risk profile sits with the supplier or manufacturer. However, the lights and services are designed in such a way that another service manager can step in if and when necessary. In the lighting industry, we're fortunate. More efficient lighting technology can lower electricity bills, and the savings can be used to pay for new lights. This also applies for other technologies including PV, biomass, insulation, basically anything that can improve energy efficiency. Energy savings pay off capital investment. It opens up a lot of traditional finance models, asset finance, operational leases, on balance, off balance. Energy performance contracts and the Green Deal were predicated on this relationship. The relationship between reduced bills and finance repayment hasn't always went well. There are many variables, changes in use, how to split the economic benefit, who maintains the asset, ownership, residual value, calculations, etc., etc. The cornerstone of a good cost-benefit relationship is quality measurement and verification. Everything else can be built on this. Traditionally, this has been expensive and only made sense in big projects where M&V costs were a small fraction of a total project cost. When we have reliable M&V, you can demonstrate to customers a cost reduction model based on fact. We can be held accountable and attract investment. Good M&V opens up a lot of possibilities contractually. guaranteed savings, profit sharing, transparency, quantifiable benefits of a managed service. M&V is the catalyst which marries together cost savings and service costs at a contractual level. Electricity measurement is generally challenging because it's normally done at the whole building level. The problem is separating lighting costs from heating costs, cooking, computer and IT equipment. Technology has already given us an answer. Wireless comms and sensor technology have greatly reduced in price over the past 2 decades, to the point where we are looking to connect everything from doorbells and jackets to pillboxes and heating. The list is endless. We can now remotely monitor pretty much anything, from light levels to carbon dioxide levels, from electricity consumption to alcohol vapour. M&V is a small part of IoT, or Internet of Things, and it is now cost effective. Egg lighting uses the latest Bluetooth mesh technology to make sensors and light fittings connected. Bluetooth mesh is ubiquitous in every new mobile phone and is a key enabler of the Internet of Things. We can now run emergency lighting tests remotely, monitor building occupancy and environmental conditions. We have an unprecedented level of information about how the lighting is being used. It helps us to understand the most efficient control profiles, furthering our value proposition. By virtue of having the lighting system connected, we are able to constantly innovate our service proposition and continually add value. Some of the low-lying fruit in terms of services is emergency lighting, traditionally a labour-intensive process, security and access control services, health and well-being services. The relationship between light and health is now well established as we spend more time indoors and in front of computer screens. Asset tracking and location services. Every phone in a building can be connected to lighting. Bluetooth tags can be used to connect and monitor computers, desks, any asset that you might want to track. We want businesses to see lighting upgrades as an opportunity to put in infrastructure for IoT and Industry 4.0. We want infrastructure that can constantly be upgraded and doesn't need to be indiscriminately replaced. We want to use technology in a way that enables the transition to a digital and circular economy. It's ironic that we are returning to that light bulb moment where bulbs can be changed without disposing of the entire fitting. With the advent of IoT, light bulbs can renew their status as the symbol of ideas and innovation. Thank you.
Okay, well that's Heather. I can't see that there are any questions up on the screen. It says no questions have been asked yet. I don't know if anyone that's listening would like to ask some questions. And we have an opportunity. Heather, did you have any questions you'd like to ask?
So yeah, if anybody's got any questions, please submit these via the online function. We've still got 15 minutes if you want to ask Lynn, Peter or Brian a question. One question that I do have is, Lynn, you mentioned the benefits of circular businesses. What are the risks?
Yeah, well, Peter was going to answer, I think probably because Peter works with businesses and he sees it every day, so I'll hand over to Peter.
So I think one of the things that I would generally say is that a circular model is not inherently more risky than anything else. I think it basically comes down to innovation and the risks involved in innovation, investing in R&D, trying something new and trying to make an impact, in established markets, and established ways of working. So that type of activity, I think, is inherently risky. anyway, but the rewards that we see from moving, the long-term rewards that we see from moving to these type of circular models, I think definitely outweigh those risks. And there is a lot of support and guidance, practical support and guidance out there in the kind of landscape that helps to de-risk that innovation activity. Obviously things like our business support service and grant funds which are available to kind of support that activity, and what we want to do is provide a bit of a platform and a bit of a safety net, particularly for SMEs, because we know that the challenges and the pressures of core business and day-to-day business activity quite often require a priority and a focus that means that type of innovation activity can sometimes be can fall by the wayside. So we want to support that and provide the capacity and the resource to support companies in Scotland to explore these innovative new approaches and what they can mean.
Thanks, Peter.
Do you want to say from your perspective, Brian, what you see some of the risks are?
Yeah, I think there's risk to manufacturers. I mean, there's a huge opportunity. I think the opportunity outweighs any of the risks. But for those that don't have any sight of the opportunity, for example, manufacturers that are not prepared to take products back and refurbish them and put them back into the supply chain. It's a big shift for manufacturers. They just want to get kind of more product out the door tomorrow and then even more product the next day, which is very linear. Nothing ever comes back to them. So if they don't prepare for taking product back, then the business is going to get left behind.
Great, thanks. We've had a couple of questions come in. So the first one, can you tell us more about the Circular Economy Investment Fund?
Yeah, so the Circular Economy Investment Fund is part of Zero Waste Scotland's ERDF funded Circular Economy programme. It is grant funding. We're investing in a circular economy in Scotland, but it is grant funding. The awards available through that are between £50,000 and £1 million, with various stages of co-funding requirements between those. All of the technical detail, by the way, is on our website. But the rationale of the investment fund is to support practical investments on the ground for companies that are at the stage of commercialisation and operationalisation for a circular economy business model. So in tandem with the non-financial business support service, we aim to move companies along the development pathway, helping to de-risk that innovation process and actually get them to the point where they are investment ready, but perhaps not quite commercially investment ready. So the investment grant fund is there to support that and actually provide a bit of a foot up there.
Thank you. Another question here is, what can the banking industry do to help the businesses that adopt circular economy model grow?
Well, I answer from a Zero Waste Scotland perspective and the challenges that we've given to, well, even beyond the banking industry investment. And then if Brian could come in after and he can use his actual practical experience. So we identified, well, quite a few years ago now, that, you know, at one point, because of the Circular Economy Investment Fund, for example, that Peter talked about, where it is a grant, it's got conditions, there's criteria in order to get that, but when money runs out, and when European money runs out, for example, we need to be looking to the wider banking and investment sector to support the circular economy. We had a session bringing together a lot of investors and, well, high street banks at the time, just over 2 years ago. And what the banks were saying was that they would not change their criteria of deciding whether to invest in an organisation. They wanted to see 3 years profitability, and they didn't see that would change. Now, in terms of circular economy, and because Brian has described his business, it's not traditional. It's not a traditional, easily understood. So it requires the banking and investment industry to think about another way of doing things. So if Brian had a company, for example, that manufactured a product, sold the product and to a customer, and that was the end of it. He had no more connection with the customer. That's traditionally what I think a lot of banks and investors are used to. But to go to a bank or investor and say, well, actually, I'm going to get my income stream is not going to be a one-off. My income stream is going to be over a period of time, in fact, a number of years. And it could be that it starts low and it gets higher. So it's asking the banking industry to sort of widen their perspective. A couple of years ago, the European Investment Bank were investing. They had a circular economy team set up. They still do have. Obviously there are some challenges around that just now, but it would be interesting for us to go back out and interesting to hear from some of the people that are listening to this presentation as to what the banking sector is doing. Diane, how have you found the banking industry? What would you like more done?
I kind of, beyond kind of just egg lighting, I think as we kind of, a service economy has a very important part to play in a circular economy. And as we transition to more of a service economy, like for example lighting, people generally own lights at some point. They might finance the purchase of them, but ultimately the customer ends up owning the light. The customer's not good at disposing of them or remanufacturing or keep them in use. So it's better to have the manufacturer or the supplier to do that, but if you make the manufacturer, the supplier, the owner, then they're going to need a huge amount of investment to get that infrastructure in place, which enables the service element of it. So for us, we need capital to invest in the lighting and sensor network. It's a bit like in your house, we need somebody to buy the router that allows the Wi-Fi connection to come into the home to then start offering all of the services. So that investment in a kind of, for us, an IoT and lighting infrastructure that is owned by the service provider or manufacturer is huge. So there's a substantial amount of money required to get that infrastructure in place that will allow the servitization of a lot of things that are out there that consumers don't need to own. We don't need to own CDs to have music anymore. So everything within our economy is going to be looked at through that lens now. Do we need to own it? Do we not need to own it? Are we just interested in the service? And as soon as we identify that this is actually, we're just interested in a service, then the model around that product or enabler will change completely.
I do have, Heather, if I can come in, I can't see any more questions that have come up, and really just to put that back and to ask people listening and the wider banking sector, do the bank's current investment criteria allow funding of circular economy business models? And if not, is there anything that you can do as banking professionals to change and influence this? And also from a Zero Waste Scotland perspective, how can we help you to provide more education, learning, CPD opportunities and build the capacity of staff in the banking and the finance sectors?
Thanks, Lynn. If anybody wants to reply to Lynn's question, you can do so via the questions section, or you can leave that in the feedback at the end of this webcast. I'll just wait a minute or so, Lynn, and see if we get anything.
No, as I said before, Heather, this is about working in partnership. So it's that collaborative approach, and what can we all do using the background and the expertise that we have to make a transformational change, really.
Definitely.
In a very practical sense, businesses that are changing towards service models would benefit from low-cost finance over longer term, so that they can. It's difficult for businesses to all of a sudden transition to services, and paying for that the infrastructure that's maybe required. Then it's difficult to kind of for businesses to raise that money, particularly start-up businesses.
Okay, nothing else coming through at this point, so I think it'd be a good time to wrap it up. I would just like to thank Lynn, Peter and Brian for providing such an insightful webcast, and of course to our listeners as well. For members of the Chartered Banking Institute, today's webcast can be recorded as part of your ongoing CPD. Please remember to record this via the logbook in the members area of the website. The slide pack will be available to all listeners after today's presentation. We would also welcome your feedback on today's webcast. Once again, we'd like to thank you for your participation and thanks for listening. Thank you.
Can we add our thanks to that as well, Heather?
Of course you can.
And please visit www.zerowastescotland.org.uk for more information, and you can find out how to get in touch with us there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.